Hi everyone, I'm Jeff Curran, Managing Director of Curran and Associates. We're an executive recruitment firm and we have a focus on executive appointments in data and analytics. And through that, I've had the good fortune of being able to meet and know our guest with us today, Shailendra Kumar. We've known each other since about 2010, if my memory is correct. Hi Shailendra.
Hi.
Thank you for being here, and for everyone's benefit, Shailendra is the author of the bestseller Making Money Out of Data, and so have the opportunity to, talk with you and ask some questions and get your thoughts on this important topic, making money out of data. But for the benefit perhaps of those, Shailendra, listening to us, I'll just share a little bit about your background if that's okay with you. So Shailendra's experience has spanned more than 2 decades, and he has worked with a number of corporations, consulting services and software companies in various industries, including retail, telecommunications, financial services and travel. And his focus has been to help realise incremental value hidden in data. He has published multiple articles in different journals, and as mentioned to you previously, his most recent expose is a bestseller, and he's the author of Making Money Out of Data. So thanks, Shailendra.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. So maybe as a starting point, and my first question for you is, analytics has been on a journey. I'd be interested to understand your perspective on how you think it has evolved.
That's a very good question, actually. Analytics has been on a journey. And if I look at it, when I talk to people, anyone who reads an Excel spreadsheet calls himself doing analytics. But is that truly analytics? So I would turn around and say analytics is a bastardized term today. So it all started in around about early 70s, where it was all about data warehousing. Then it came on to reporting, alerting, and whatnot. And now we reached a point where we talked about outcomes out of data. We talk about business outcomes that we want to get out of data without thinking about what technology, what platform, what people and what processes are behind that.
Okay, so perhaps you can just expand and take that a bit further and just describe what are the different layers of analytics.
Okay, so analytics has 4 different layers of sophistication. Then the very basic layer, the basic foundational layer is the data management, wherein you get data coming from all the sources, multiple sources into one place, create something that is called a data mart or a data warehouse. You get the 360-degree view of the customer, of product line, or vendors and whatnot. And that's where data management and data collection happens. The second layer on top of that is the descriptive analytics layer, where the idea is to get reports and dashboards done. And so you get all the reporting line, slice and dice and whatnot. OLAP cubes were talked about once upon a time, and that all resides there. It's again an IT process where you get some reports as an end result, and some mathematical computation at the back of that, so that you run stuff as you go. The third layer, the next layer on top of that is ad hoc, because when people get to see reports, they want to ask questions. So when they ask questions, someone has to answer that question. So that question comes in from asking those ad hoc questions, getting answered by IT teams or the reporting teams who've actually created those reports to answer those questions. And that's the ad hoc analysis kind of stuff.
Well, that could be in finance or in marketing.
Anywhere. So you go to a business guy, and business guy's got that report, and he would say, why has that happened? And he would ask that question to the team and their ad hoc services team or business team, and they will investigate and come back. And the fourth layer is the predictive analytics layer, and that's where everything is happening in this stage, where people are trying to not only understand what happened in the past, but they want to know what is going to happen in the future. And to lay the context there, this particular layer is the layer where you don't only predict the future, but also find out the reasons behind what's going to happen, so that you can actually control that. Because if you don't know the reason of what is going to happen, then you cannot do anything about it. So if I'm going to predict, I usually say that, it's a kind of a situation where if I predict that someone is going to die tomorrow, unless I tell them the reasons, what is driving that, you won't be able to save them.
So, Shailendra, what was the catalyst or the trigger for that level 4 to come into being?
Well, level 4 is based on getting the data in there and learning from the past. But then statistical modeling comes into play. And where what you do there is you try and build a model or create a kind of a futuristic approach on the basis of what has happened in the past. And you use various data points to actually predict the future.
So why do models exist now rather than 10 years ago?
So, Jeff, it's a very good question, but actually the answer to that is that it was always there.
Right.
The problem was that people didn't have the computational power to actually run that very quickly.
Right.
And today the situation is that even though we've got those models, we can run them quite quickly because of the kind of powerful computers that you've got. So, for example, my mobile phone is so powerful today that you could run huge algorithms through the phone itself in real time. And that way you could predict a conversation itself, if you look at it. But 20 years ago, and I remember 20 years ago, I used to have a big machine which was 486 with 512 KB of RAM, and today my phone is 6 GB of RAM.
Yes.
And GBs, we were really struggling to understand what was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So the world is changing, the technology is changing, and it's become much more viable.
Okay, thank you for that. So why, in your opinion, is analytics playing a role in business decision making?
So what has happened over the years is that earlier, analytics was only kept to reporting, and people would say that they've created a report and that's analytics for them. But then when predictive came into being, people's questions changed. So the business now has started asking different questions. They're not asking that question, what was my sales in New South Wales last year, but they're asking why the sales dropped or why the sales have gone up this quarter in New South Wales. There are very different questions to which the answers are now being solved or given by predictive analytical environment.
And so taking that a step further, do you think that company boards fully understand the potential that exists in utilising data?
Yes and no. The organizations at the board level do feel the need and they do understand that that's the way to go. The problem is that right from the senior level, they don't know, they don't have the skill set, they don't understand what is required to deliver successful analytics projects or get value out of it. So what is happening is that they're dependent on their CIO because it's got data in it and it's got some coding in it. So people think because it is coding and because it is data, which should be a CIO's place. So it's given to a CIO to hire the right people for that particular organization. But the problem is there is a difference between an IT function and a business analytics function. Analytics should sit in business because it's asking and answering business questions, whereas CIO is best run through the IT processes. And the IT processes are very, very organized. They're very, very sequential. And whereas the analytics processes are very, very ad hoc. You ask a question and you don't know where to start with. Whereas you need to define a business requirement upfront for any IT project. You described that very clearly in the book on what the difference between how IT organization and analytics organization differentiate by itself. So coming back to your question, at the board level, organizations are thinking that they need to do this, but they are not having the right skill set, even at that level, to understand the way forward, the path forward for them to actually execute it.
So one thing we see, obviously, in terms of the work that we do in executive appointments and senior hiring, is that we come across a whole range of different terms: chief data officer, head of analytics. I could go on with a whole list.
Yeah.
But I'd be interested in your thoughts as to whether those terms are being used or those titles are being used correctly. Because I think you have a view that there is a difference between the role of a chief data officer and the role of a head of data analytics. And perhaps you could just talk us through that.
Yep. So it is funny, right? Because I found out from someone a few months ago that a chief data officer is now being entitled or is expected to generate incremental value out of data. Well, actually not, because the chief data officer is an IT person. And the way it has been set up is that the guy is going to look at all the fundamentals of data flows and make sure that the right data is going into the right places and accesses has been defined properly. There is no data breaches. Whereas a chief analytics officer's role is to actually create incremental value. The problem also lies in is that the chief analytics officer's skill set is very different to the chief data officer's skill set. Because to create incremental value, you need to be creative. You need to think outside of the box. Whereas the chief data officer has been trained through his life to think inside the box. So if you don't think outside of the box, innovate, how are you going to create value? Otherwise, you're going to do the same thing. So I usually say if you keep on doing what you're doing, you'll keep on getting what you're getting. And that's where chief analytics officer comes into play.
So Shailendra, what do you think is a suitable profile for a chief analytics officer?
So a chief analytics officer, first of all, needs to be a creative person.
Yes.
He should have a very good understanding of statistical modeling techniques. He should understand art of possibility. Art of possibility in the sense that he should be able to say that if I have picked a particular business problem, I should not be restricting myself to a technology or a data or a process, but I should think outside of the box and try and solve that problem. A chief analytics officer has to have a business problem solving experience and knowledge and also be creative and thinking outside of the box.
Do you think most organisations, or do you have an opinion on what organisations are ready to have a chief analytics officer?
Well, most of the organizations who want to make money out of data or want to to create incremental value, I think they should have a chief analytics officer. But to make sure that they have the right chief analytics officer and not put someone who was doing a project management role in the organization, in the IT division, is now doing a chief analytics officer role. Very two different skill sets. You need to have different backgrounds. If you try and get, and we've seen that in the past, what happens is organizations will put in a guy or a girl in a IT department coming through the ranks, and they put him to run the chief analytics office, whereas they have never thought the way a chief analytics officer should think. And then what happens is when the whole thing fails and there's not much incremental value generated, they say, you know what, analytics doesn't work. Yes. So they don't blame the individual, they blame the whole function itself.
Yes, I understand.
And that's the challenge which organizations need to understand and create a kind of a balance around it.
Thanks, Shailendra. So let's now perhaps, if I can get you to share a success story where you think analytics has created or generated business benefit or business value. Do you have one you can share with us?
Yeah, there are many use cases around, and I'll take one from your own industry. So one of the large retailers in the US actually wanted to create a profile of their employee who's likely to leave them. So basically what happened was they had a high attrition rate. So they wanted to understand the profile of the employees and so that they can take action. So when they were talking and we said, fine, what we do is we will get data not only from their regular profile data, we will also take their social media data, we'll take their performance data, we'll take where they come from, their geodemographic data and so forth. So we collected all of that data and created a kind of a large analytics record. And that record then we used to actually create an attrition score for each and every employee.
And so can you recall what sort of numbers of sort of employees that you were?
So we're talking about hundreds and thousands of employees. So it's not
small scale.
Not a small scale. So it was a large organization, if I can say. So we got that profile. First of all, got the attrition score, and then we created a profile of an employee who will leave them who leaves them in the first year.
Who has a higher propensity
to leave.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So when we did that and we created the profile, you will laugh, but what we found out was that employees who had a cat were very likely to leave in the first year. Now, what that did was that they made changes to their interview process, and there was a question asked during the interview process whether you have a cat. Now, that was not only the only question, this was calling it out because this is a bit amusing. but there were lots of other questions that they made changes to. And finally, when they actually did that, they reduced their attrition rate of their employees in the first year by more than 15%. And that was huge. For an organization which has got more than 100,000 employees, 15% is a lot of employees. So that was the change that they were getting just by understanding the profile and also understanding the, what drives the behavior of people who are going to leave them in the first year.
Yes. I don't have a cat, Shailendra. So taking that a step further then, are you able to give us an example where you think perhaps there was a lost opportunity or a failure, if I could talk in those terms, maybe just a sort of a lost opportunity in relation to the role of analytics and the part it could play?
I'll go back to that conversation around, most of the organizations or some organizations are trying to get there, but they're getting wrong talent to run to do the job. Just because, and I'll tell you, and you come from the industry, if you go and do a search on data scientists, you will find so many data scientists, I'll be laughing. But to be honest, if you ask them the second question, not the first question, the second question, you'll figure out that they've never done anything like that. But the problem is, because it's a buzzword, people have started putting those buzzwords to their profiles. And on the other side of things, the guy who's interviewing does not know what they're asking the question, and these guys are even getting hired. And they're doing what they were doing earlier, which was creating reports.
Yes.
And everyone is happy.
Yes.
But what that does is that they're not doing exactly what they should be doing for the organization, solving business problems. Now, because they're not solving business problems, after a while they say, well, yeah, it's an old same story. So there's a huge amount of opportunity lost in large organizations because they hire the wrong talent. And that goes back to the fact that the HR organization need to actually define the role of each and every individual, what they're going to do in that analytics context, in the analytics division. But then again, it's the thing that these guys don't know what they don't know. Keep on praising the same profile of the customers, of the employees, which they think are the right people to actually do that job.
It's an interesting point that you raised, Shailendra, because I also think, and I'd be interested if you have an opinion on this, is that people are being hired on the basis of being a data scientist to be able to solve problems, but that the organisation is still lagging in terms of creating the framework and the environment to allow that to truly happen.
Yep.
Because they're still thinking traditionally. What do you think about that?
So there are the second component of that. So for example, let's think about this. So you've got a problem with the hiring the right data scientist. Now let's solve that problem. Let's think that we've solved it and we've got the right individual to do the data science role in the organization. We've got the problem then comes is, even if he builds a very good model and a very good outcome or output that needs to be now executed by the business, it doesn't get executed just because the business is not ready and the business is not thinking outside of the box. It goes back to the fact there are people who've told me quite a number of times that we've been doing this for 50 years. What do you know about my business? And we've been successful doing this.
Yes.
But the basic thinking or the basic premise of analytics is to do something different. And that's what you need to find out. The problem is that organizations are not able to get that change alongside the business. And that needs a bit of work. So not only they need the right talent at data science level, they also need to educate the business teams so that they can execute a model that is an output that has been generated or created by the analytics team.
Yes, I agree with you, Shailendra. I think there's still work to be done by organisations in that regard. So maybe if we just continue on with the theme of the topic for today, which is making money out of data, and take that background and what we talked about and pull that together in terms of having a discussion about what does an organisation need to do to monetize data or to extract commercial value from it.
So here's where my consulting part comes up and says there are three components, and the people, processes, and technology. These three things they need to get right. But having said that, they need to define the skill set required to do this upfront. They need to make sure they get the right team, they get the right processes in place, and they get the right technology in order to deliver a successful analytics organization within the organization.
Because I think it is a challenge because I think even without analytics, different parts of organisations, it can sometimes be challenging to actually quantify the contribution that they're making and some of the outcomes with some new initiatives. So can you just talk a little bit more? Can you just go into a bit more detail in terms of how an organisation can get commercial value from data?
So it has to start from the top. It has to start from the fact that the board or the senior leadership needs to agree that they want to go down that path. And when it starts there. So you need to hire the right chief analytics officer. That's the first thing. Saying that second time, but I say that every day, that a chief data officer is not a chief analytics officer. Don't ask the chief analytics officer to do chief data officer's role and vice versa, because they're two different skill sets, two different people. Get that right, get the teams below that right, provide them with the right technology set, whether it is SaaS, whether it is SAP Leonardo, you get the right technology in there. Having said that, then it becomes the other aspect. And as we talked about the 4 layers, and usually people start with a big bang saying, well, I want to get all my data right, and then I will think about a business problem. I would say turn it around. Don't do that, because if you go down that path, by the time you get data collected into one place and start doing something about it, you're 6 months, 7 months delayed or late. During that time, the business problems have changed, the business questions have changed, and you haven't answered anything. What you do on the other side of things is you define the business problem first and start collecting data to solve those business problems. So in that case, you'll give some value quickly. You'll give some value in the first month or the second month. And at the same time, you're collecting the data to actually solve that problem. So you've got that data collected. And now when you look at the second problem to solve, you can utilize the data that you've collected and also bring in more data. So what you're doing is you're solving problems. So you will end up with a data warehouse in, say, 1 year, but you would have solved 4 or 5 problems at the same time. So people are not waiting for getting a result after 6 or 7 months once the data has been collected.
So are you suggesting then that organisations shouldn't necessarily just focus on trying to get a big bang, but to go for some smaller, quicker wins on a continual basis?
Absolutely. So start small, think big. So when you do invest in these platforms, you should start at a very smaller scale, thinking about get the full suite of technology and processes in there, get that best practice or next practice, whatever you call it, there, but start with a business problem and try to solve that problem first. Get value out of that. Once you get value out of that, what will happen by taking this approach is that you will solve a problem, and by doing that, you will collect more data. You will collect the data required to solve that problem and not have a big bang approach of collecting all the data and solving nothing. But here you've solved a problem, and that ways you will get the trust of the business as well. When you get the trust of the business, they will come and ask you more questions. And that way the business problems get more. Whether you can solve it through the existing collected data or not, we don't know, but you can bring in more data as you go, and you can then build the platform or expand the platform to solve more and more business problems.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you for that. So Shailendra, it would be great if you could share with us an example of an organisation that has successfully monetized data.
Jeff, that's a very interesting question. Actually, let's not talk about an organization. Let's talk about an industry as a whole. So let's take the telco industry. In some parts of the world, in the telecommunication industry, some of the telecommunication companies have actually made voice and data free for its consumers. What does that mean? That means that a man walking on the street will use a telephone, a mobile phone with data and the voice services, but will not pay a penny. So the question arises, where is the organization going to make money from? Is there any other way that they're going to be making money? They've got infrastructure costs, they've got operation costs. All these costs need to be covered somehow. So I was thinking about it, and I figured out what actually is going to happen. So for example, each and every consumer who's actually having a mobile phone will be utilizing the data, will be utilizing the services. And they've got the GPS coordinates, they've got the data coming in on the social media, So the telco knows where a consumer is going, what they're buying, what their behavior is. So what's going to happen is then the telecommunication company is going to go to other organizations like an insurer or a retailer and sell them hot leads, sell them information about their customers. For example, someone who's out there in the market for an insurance, they would know. And so they will go to an insurer and say, well, hey, that individual is looking for an insurance. Would you want to sell them the insurance? And that hot lead will be far more powerful and far more valuable for the company. So thus, the entire business model is changing now from B2C to B2B.
That's fascinating, Shailendra. So really then the customer is no longer the consumer, but a business.
Yes, absolutely. And that's how the whole thing is changing. That's pure monetization of data, which is leading to the changing business model.
Great. Thanks, Shailendra. Another question I'd like to put to you relates to your book, Making Money Out of Data. And in that, you talk about the art and science of analytics. Can you just explain what you mean by that?
So whatever we've talked about today as well is about creativity. Analytics is, as much as it is about data, as much as it is about statistics and modeling, it is about creativity. If you go to an analytics person, a statistician, for example, and you say that I've got 20 rows, or possibly, let's take this number, I've got 10,000 rows, can I build a model? The answer he will give you is, too less data, mate, can't do much about it. Can you come back when you've got more? Go collect more data. But when analytics comes into play, when you really be creative, you will think of ways of creating more data which will complement and solve the problem. So it's not about that I don't have data, now I can't do anything. It's about creating more data that can help me solve that problem. In that case, it's about creativity. It is the art of possibility. It is about people thinking outside of the box. Not about, I've got these variables and what do I do with these variables and how much data do I have? I'll give you another, and this is mentioned in the book as well. One more thing that comes out quite often on is that BI and analytics are mentioned in same breath. People would say, if you ask someone where do you work, say, well, I am the head of BI analytics. That is wrong. You cannot have BI and analytics under the same platform. Why? Let's think about that. What is BI? BI is business intelligence, and as we know it, it's about reports. It's about building dashboards, reporting, slicing and dicing. And the very basic premise of that is to make sure that you've got variables defined. As they say in IT, as long as the plumbing is right, and one of the IT guys told me, Shelly, as long as the plumbing is right, you will get the report right? So what you need to do is you map all the variables and map it to a report, and as long as the data is flowing perfectly fine, you will get report every morning. Whereas that's an IT process. If the plumbing is right,
understood,
the answer is right.
Yes.
Whereas analytics, if you look at analytics, you put in the variables and you do the plumbing, you actually want the pipe to break because you want those variables to interact with each other to tell you what you don't know. And that's not a sequential process. That's a very different process because you're making the variables to interact with each other to tell you something about it. And that's not an IT process. And once you find out something, that may get you a report. Maybe, I don't know. A report may not be an answer. So there are two different ways of thinking. And you can't bring them together under one because people are trained, IT guys are trained to do sequential stuff, building pipes, as they say. Sorry.
And there are reporting.
And they're reporting people who've been doing that. So now imagine this guy is now being told to do analytics. Yes. And he says, well, where's the requirement? And I usually used to say, there is no requirement. Tell me what you do. What are you going to find? Yes. There is no requirement for analytics. There is no business requirement. Ultimately, we came to a situation where they said, write the business requirement. So they sent me a big sheet of business requirements and I started filling it up and sent it back. I said, well, there is no business requirement. I'll look at the data and tell you what my requirement is. He said, but we can't tell you that. So it's a very different thought process. Analytics is not an IT process or it's not a sequential process. It's an ad hoc. It's outside of the box thinking.
Yes.
That's the differentiation.
I think we might close there, Shailendra, because I feel we've covered a lot of ground, a lot of great insights and comments and points and opinions that you've offered. One question I'd really like to ask, though, is why did you write the book?
So, again, coming back to that story about analytics as a bastardized term, and I was meeting lots of people who were telling me that they were doing analytics, and there was a lot of confusion in the market. People were talking about analytics when they didn't do any analytics. So I thought, why not document it? Why not give people examples of what analytics is and how it is being used in various organizations? So in the book, you've got 5 different industries. You've got financial services, which is insurance, one aspect of insurance, credit cards, you've got telco, you've got retail, and you've got CPG. And they're different flavors of analytics, and how these organizations are making money out of utilizing data is what has been talked in the book. And when you look at it, it also, the next level of that is to showcase a step-by-step process on executing analytics projects. So that's where the whole book was designed in the first place, to actually clarify. So yeah, there was a lot of confusion that I see with people. So I thought, let's document it, let people understand what is the art of possibility and how they can utilize data to make money, and also a step-by-step process to actually drive value for their organizations. And to be honest, I haven't mentioned one technical term in the book. It is a business book, and people from these industries could use it and they would relate to it, because I have gone through that myself, and so they would have gone through that kind of a situation in their lives at their work as well.
Okay, thanks, Shailendra. So if people want to buy the book, it's called Making Money Out of Data, and they can just go to search Amazon.com. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So they can go to Amazon.com, type in Making Money Out of Data. They can get a Kindle version and a paperback version. Okay. Both the versions are available, and they can download or take the paperback version and start reading.
All right. Well, thanks for being a part of this podcast, Shailendra. I think your insights are terrific. So for everyone that's listened in on this podcast, I believe there's a lot that you would have been able to gain from that. So from my perspective as MD Jeff Curran of Curran and Associates, if you need to contact me with any questions around hiring data analytics talent or seeking market information or salary advice, you can reach me on gjc@curranrecruit.com.au is my email address, and I look forward to hearing from you. And thanks again, Shailendra.
Thank you very much.